When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. Walk on with love in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk It is my pleasure now to introduce our speaker for today, the Reverend Steve Adkins, the pastor of the People's Church of Divine Prophecy. Steve is an international medium, healer, and personal teacher and friend of mine. He's been a ordained spiritualist minister for a long time.
A few.
89
years?
No, that he got 1989. Yeah, he looks really good for his age. Please join me in welcoming Steve to the podium.
My lecture today is about my path and what has brought me to this point in my life. We all tend to be cyclic beings and find ourselves, I do anyway, find myself looking in retrospection over not just my life this past year, but my life in general. And when Adkins canceled her lecture, and she asked me to make her apologies, she's pretty ill today. And I thought about what to speak about. And usually I speak on some spiritualist principle because that's what I am as a spiritualist by training and by faith. But I thought about what is most useful to people is to see how somebody else walks their spiritual life, because that's how I got to where I'm at. When I started on my conscious spiritual path, I found myself in a county jail facing a lot of criminal charges. I had been a criminal for most of my life. I made a living off of ripping off drug dealers. And it was a pretty tough trade, and it was a professional trade, and I was taught that by older guys who had it down to a skill. It wasn't random, it wasn't without discipline. It was taught as a disciplined thing. There were specific ways to do it, specific rules about how to do it, and these guys had fine-tuned this and were making a lot of money at it. And into this I came at about age 17. And these guys were notorious around the area. They were known by the police, they were known by the feds, and they kind of felt that I was the material that they wanted because I had a pretty tough attitude about things. And what ended that was I came to do a rip-off on some drug dealers, and they ended up being undercover federal agents. and we had a shootout where a lot of people got injured, and they wrote it up in the Orlando Sentinel as a small Vietnam erupts in a rural neighborhood. So it was a pretty traumatic thing. During my course of incarceration, a number of spiritual teachers came into my life, believe it or not. In the county jail, I was reintroduced to my Catholic faith, which was kind of nice to me because it was something I knew. I was almost an altar boy at one time and was getting prior to becoming a pure hedonist and hellraiser. So I had a root in that and a comfort with that. And then an individual came up there and he said there was a lot of people in the cell block that were withdrawing from drugs. Back then they didn't have all the stuff they have now. They didn't have methadone. They didn't have all these centers that they rush you to, and they were very naive about how drugs affected the body. So they just crammed you all in a jail cell and hoped you lived. And this one guy comes up there and he's a student of Yogi Bhajan's. Harry Byard was his name, and I know we all know Harry Byard from the camp. That's not the same guy. It's a different guy. And this guy had been in service to the drug community for a while. He carried a van around with oxygen in it and recovery drugs for people that overdosed, and he would constantly respond to those kind of things. So this guy was in service to people before he got into the discipline and became a student of Yogi Bhajan's. And he came into the county jails and he said, those of you that want to learn a discipline about how to control what's going on with you and for the rest of your life, if you volunteer, I'll get you in a separate cell block, get you good food, but you have to do what I tell you to do every time I tell you to do it. So I volunteered for that program. And what we did was we began a regiment, and I was in that county jail for 6 months. 5 o'clock in the morning, you got up and did your prayers and exercises. 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you sat and you did chants. 5 o'clock in the evening, he would come in and teach us more things to do. And he got us onto a vegetarian diet. So that was my first introduction to a different type of religious expression, a more spiritual expression. And don't get me wrong, Catholics, the Catholic faith is a wonderful faith, and my mom's part of it still. A lot of my family, friends, and relatives are part of the Catholic faith. And it wasn't that big of a leap for me to move into spiritualism, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. As my time went on, I was incarcerated for about 5 years in between federal and state prisons. And it was a very difficult time of my life. I was pretty tough, so I didn't have a lot of trouble in there. The way it works in there is I always liken it to there's sheep, wolves, and lions in there. The lions are the top of the food chain, and they're pretty apparent who they are. The wolves were people like me who didn't have a lot to take from them, and was a lot of trouble to get it from them. And they could without take it, but it was a matter of efficiency. They moved on to the sheep. And the sheep were, without a doubt, was difficult to watch because I had always taken up for people, always taken up for the weaker, because I was pretty handy with my fists and my feet. I was a full contact kickboxer and an amateur boxer, and I always took up for the weaker people. But in there you can't. And I think the hardest things that I had to do when I was in there was nothing. Was to watch what happened to other people and see it about to happen to them and know it was going to happen to them. And no matter what you said to them, they would not listen to you to stop it from happening to them. The worst thing I saw happen in there was this guy who had become kind of wealthy. He came from a wealthy background, and the prison I was in went from hardcore prison to a first-time offenders prison. They were in a transition because they try to segregate the criminals so they don't have those kinds mixed together. Otherwise, there's unending problems. So during this transition, they mixed the two together. You had people in there for drugs sitting here and people for mass murdering right here. And it was quite a thing there. So this one guy, he came in there and he was one of the first-time drug offenders, kind of naive about prison life. And these guys took him in, a group of white guys took him in, and in there you wear fatigues and khakis. That's the uniform. But everybody customizes it according to the group they have. Some of them have their pockets sewn a certain way. Some of them have, banners on their shoulders. It's all very group specific, and it's not just ethnic. It is group, not just only ethnicity. And they got him in here, and he's wearing their clothes, and he's going along with it for about 2 or 3 years. And he got a parole date. And what happens when you get a parole date is everybody on the compound knows it. For 90 days before you get released, everybody knows that you've got a date that you're being released by. And if you get into one fight, one disagreement, you lose that date. So it's a very vulnerable position to be in unless you're the type of person that'll kill somebody if they screw with you, no matter when it is or what it is that they screw with you about. Those are the only people that don't have those kind of issues in there. I was not one of those kind of people, nor was this guy. So his date's approaching and his crowd's protecting him. They're getting money from him because his family's sending him a lot of money in there. And as his date approaches, they put another prisoner in this dormitory situation. It was a black man, and he was from the Malcolm X group that murdered all those people up in New York. The Malcolm X that murdered Malcolm X and his entire family. This is one of those people, and they put him in the dormitory here. So these guys, these white guys, they're into gambling, they're into drugs, they're into everything. And they didn't like this guy being in the dormitory. So they figured out this little scheme where they were going to get rid of him and keep this other guy in the prison. And when the white guy that they were setting up was out on his duties, they broke into his locker, took his radio, took his stuff out of his locker. It's called knocking somebody's locker. That happened fairly routinely in there to people that had things to take. And they told him that this black guy down there did it. And they gave him a club to go down there and confront the black guy with. Now, you say one thing to one person in there and everybody in the prison knows it in a matter of 5 minutes. He told everybody how he's going to go down there and beat this guy up and get his radio back. Now, this black guy's got natural life. He's never going to be out of prison the rest of his life. So this white guy goes down there, and of course the black guy knew he was coming, and he said, the white guy says to him, he said, "I want my radio back." He said, "You're mistaken, I didn't take your radio." Moved on. The white guy said again, he said, "I want my radio back." Now this white guy is getting ready to be released in a matter of weeks. Weeks. And he asked me what I thought he should do when his locker got knocked. I said, "I think you ought to go up there to the administration building, tell the captain you want to be put in solitary confinement for the next 2 weeks, and walk out of this place and never see anybody again." That's my advice to you right now. He didn't take it. So he goes down there and he's confronting this guy, and he tries to pull this club out of his pants. And of course, if you're going to use a club, anybody that's been on the street knows that's not how you use it. And he got that club about halfway out of his pants, and that guy stood up and stabbed him about 25 to 30 times in front of 70 men. And that guy hit the floor, and his parting words to this world were all over a $15 radio. Now, the white guys didn't care. They got the black guy out of the dorm. That was part of their plan. They lost their meal ticket, but there were plenty more sheep in there. This is the environment that I lived in for 5 years. And I saw a lot of stuff like that. I got injured myself a couple of times, but again, if you show them that they're going to get marked up or hurt when they come after you, even if there isn't anybody in there that can't be taken, but it's a matter of economics, how much it takes to get what they want from you. I had very little to be taken. I drank hot tea instead of coffee. I smoked a pipe instead of cigarettes. So I had nothing. During this entire time, I was doing my yogic discipline. I was out on the field doing my breathing, my trying to maintain my discipline with that. My father died while I was in there, and I went to his funeral. My younger sister died of a drug overdose, and I went to her funeral, but I got escorted in handcuffs both times and had to pay for the escorts. You know, and those are some of the things that went on during that time. A lot of other things happened during that time to give me pause for concern too. And when I got out, I thought that everything was going to be just fine. And most people that are in there, when they get out, they think everything's going to be just fine. But life is a bigger struggle than ever when you come out, because nobody wants to hire you because you're an ex-convict. And your entire social, now if you're in there more than 2 years, they put you into these halfway houses and you get gradually reintroduced to society. But back then it was open the doors and you walk out the front, just like in the movies. However you get away from there is your business. Just get out the front door. And it was quite a shock to me because everybody sounded like they were being smart to me. Every time I asked them a question, I'd ask my mom what time it was, and she'd tell me it sounded like she was being smart to me. That's the culturalization that you get into. You know, everybody in there is very careful about what they say, very polite about what they say, because the consequences are completely different than they are out here to disrespecting somebody. And it took me a long time to get to that point, to where I wasn't jumpy, that if I had a girlfriend or a wife next to me in bed, that I didn't become startled every time they touched me. And even to this day, I can't go to sleep with somebody sleeping next to me and touching me. During this life's walk, though, I began to become more and more involved in my spiritual life. I began to study. I began to approach these things. And I remember I told a number of people in church organizations and spiritual organizations that I got involved in. They said, "How come you're like you are about this?" I said, "Because it's a matter of survival for me. It's not a matter of convenience or a matter of choice. I'm either this or I'm somebody you would never want to meet anywhere." I said, "That's my two choices. That's the only two ways I need to know to be. So this is a matter of survival for me." And when I tell you the things that I've come to embrace, it doesn't mean that if you embrace them, your life is going to be a land of milk and honey. Because life is life. I think the biggest thing that I have a problem with, or I see other people having problems with, is nobody thinks anything's going to end in this life that they're involved in, that they have. Nobody thinks anything's going to end. Their job, their health, their family, their life. Nobody, I mean, in the back of our mind, we all know that stuff's going to end sometime. But it's really not part of our thought process right now. And when these things end, we have a very difficult time with them. No matter what it is that ends. Because it rarely ends by our plan. The physical side of life has a beginning and an end to everything. That's the nature of this life. We need to feel that. We need to be in tune with that. What we temper that with is our spiritual beliefs, spiritual laws that we come to understand and practice that make differences in our lives. Spiritual laws are to be taken as the person hears them, as they understand them, and as they can apply them to their life. Your spiritual laws will change how you understand them and how you apply them to your life as life unfolds before you. The law of love. There's tough love. There's feel love from God. And there's infatuated love. We all experience these things. They're all parts of our life. The thing that being connected to Spirit gives me primarily is a sense of timing. When to employ these different things, because they're all correct at the appropriate time. Most of my problems with my life has been timing. I know the right thing to do, but do I ever do it at the right time? Some of the time. I'm getting better at it, a lot better at it. But this is what spiritual involvement in your life and spiritual discipline does, is it gives you timing, the right time to do things. Nothing, no new real thoughts, nothing new is under the sun. But we know the right time to do these things. That's what spiritual discipline, that's what spiritual studies give us. The law of compensation. You get according to how you act. If you don't like what you're getting, change how you're acting. It's pretty simple. I remember we were doing a trance demonstration one time. Some of y'all may have heard me talk about that. And they never called on me to ask questions in these trance demonstrations because I was asked the toughest questions under the sun to prove the trance demonstration was legitimate. And this was over in the UK at the Arthur Findlay College, and I know some of the top teachers over there have been taught by them, but sat in their classes and given them a lot of grief over the years too. Hour went on, everybody's hand was up, and they called on everybody but me. They finally called on me, and I asked the trance medium this question. I said, most of spiritualism has been accrued through mediumistic discernment. I said in the 1930s and 40s, they believed the children that died went to spirit and ran around waving banners and became messengers. I said, we now know that that's probably not true. We now know the evolution of spirit. We now know how the spirit moves through the spirit realm. I said, tell me something that I have not heard of yet that will guide my life from now to the day I die and will help me produce new revelations in my life through my spiritual acts. Now you can see why they don't want me to ask questions to the trance medium. That trance medium's response was, you only get paid once for a good act, here or hereafter, so make your mind up where you're going to collect. And you know, I had to admit that fulfilled the entire range of question that I had asked. Because everybody thinks, oh, if I do good deeds here, my life will be nicer and people will like me more, basically. And I'm building goodwill on the other side of life. Well, according to that trance medium, there's not an and. There's an either or. So pick your time. Now, I don't doubt that as you become a better person here, you have an easier time in spirit. Because the natural laws, when they're stated, are not just statements of words. They are describing an impelling action within your body, within your spirit, that causes you to be involved in situations on this world. It is a magnetic and an energetic movement within your body that we're trying to describe into words so our conscious mind can get hold of it. So when you hear these natural laws, whether it's some of these that I've spoken about or some you read about, take a moment to close your eyes and feel where that energy is in your body. Feel how it moves you. Feel how it may cause you to be in places and say things to people. Because that's what it is. It is an energetic, an impulsive type of thing that moves you on a spiritual level. On the other side of that coin, we have an opposition to that spiritual law and that energetic law is our environment, as I just described about me being in prison, which is very different between here and there, very different ways that you act between here and there, but still you're the same person inside. And your environment changes out here. It's not just out here and in there. Your environment can change. Your living environment can drastically affect how you feel about things. when you move to a new house, even if it's an agreeable place. Our instincts affect a lot of how we work. Millions of years of genetics within us. The way we respond to sudden happenings, the way we respond to things that we find that we can't control. This is our instincts. And our emotions. As we've grown out of the pack-oriented person, out of the tribal sense of things, we've become individuals. And as we become more individual, our emotions have become much more individual and much more impactful on our lives. So you have this balance that you have to strike. The emotions, instincts, and environment are very important and have a place, and spiritual law has a place. The dance is to find a happy medium with them all, a comfort with them all, and feeling how they should be applied and when they should be applied. It's very confusing sometimes. But what meditation and prayer does is it allows that spiritual presence within you that produces that natural timing. That's the key. Spiritual timing to all of this. Not trying to wish one of them or the other wasn't in your life. Not wishing that you weren't faced with what you're faced with. It's taking time to allow timing to occur. The biggest thing that's been plaguing me in the last couple months is a car issue where I had shared with you that I had blown my son's car up. And we have been looking at used cars. We've been in and out with different things. It has been a real issue. I borrowed my mother-in-law's car, and they're wanting the car back, and it just goes on and on in every aspect. I'm not getting any cooperation with anybody. So finally my daughter says yesterday, she said she had offered to allow them to get her car, but it's in New Mexico. So it has to get down here first. And she apparently had a change of heart, and she said, I will give you $300 to help you put an engine back in the vehicle that blew up. And that made it doable. So just something that simple. It was just a matter of time. That's why nothing worked out, because this is the best solution. This is the time. It feels right. It feels like the solution to me. And even though it's going to be several weeks in the making, I feel a comfort in my heart that this is the time, this is the right thing, this is what should happen. And that's how we feel these things, is a sense in our hearts. If you're feeling emotional, if you're feeling disrupted about it, don't do anything. Just be quiet until the timing feels right. So that's the key. And all of this and all of these things I've been speaking about for the last 30 minutes. Spiritual meditation, spiritual connection, to allow timing to occur in your life. Does that mean that we're not going to make mistakes? I just told you about the one I did in the pastor's reading. That probably could have been handled more diplomatically and a little better, but I had gotten to a point of frustration with it. You have to allow yourself to be human within all of this, because no matter how much you connect to God, no matter how much God influences your life, you are still a human being. And you will still have to make those decisions, sometimes based on the physical environment you're in. Forgive yourself when you make a mistake. Don't hold it against yourself. And don't be tied to the past by it. I've told you a little bit about my past. I could give up and just say, well, all the bad things that happened to me, I deserve them. And I probably do. But I also deserve a good life based on the spiritual progress I've made with my life. I feel that I deserve that, and I've worked for it. So I'm not going to be submissive, and I am not going to allow people to take advantage of me because of my past, and I feel that I owe that to the world. I remember when I was getting sobered up with an organization, because when I first came out, I left the drugs alone, but I went back to drinking for about 10 years. And I had a spiritual awakening during that process that got me out of that. And when I was in there, when I first went into that organization, they were saying, pray for people when they make you angry. Pray for people when you can't get to terms with them. And I said, I just can't do that right now. I just can't do that. And then one of the 1%ers, which are people that get violent like me when I drink, he said, pray you don't do anything to anybody. That I can do. That I can do. Because praying that I didn't do that got me in the faith of praying. It got me to trust in prayer. Because it was something that I could connect to. So when you hear all of these disciplines and you hear all of these systems, don't become overwhelmed by them. Take them where they meet, where the rubber meets the road at with you. Take the little things. Start it a piece at a time. You're not going to walk away from your old life and the next morning wake up with a brand new awareness, no matter what system you employ, no matter what belief system you choose to try to walk down the road with. It's going to be one day at a time, one event at a time, because that's how you got here. Love each day that you wake up breathing. People ask me, how's it going today? And my response is, if God saw fit to let me wake up breathing, I see fit to make something out of it. As I get older, my health isn't as good as it was. I can no longer run 2 miles or swim a mile. But I can still get up and down the stairs. I can still put fence posts in. I can still, weed the front yard. So I've got my health to an acceptable degree. But again, don't be unkind to yourself when you be human, and always connect to God at the end of the day and the beginning of the day. Opening and closing of the day. In closing, I'm going to read one of my favorite passages that the spiritualists have. And it's called On the 23rd Psalm. Thoughts on the 23rd Psalm. And we all know what that is. Yea, though I go through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. In pastures green, not always. Sometimes he who knoweth best in kindness leadeth me in weary ways where heavy shadows be. And by still waters, no, not always so. Oft times the heavy tempests round me blow, and o'er my soul the waves and billows go. But when the storms beat loudest and I cry aloud for help, the Master standeth by and whispers quietly to my soul, lo, it is I. So where he leads me I can safely go, and in the blessed hereafter I shall know why in his wisdom he hath led me so. Thank you.